would say the one thing that sticks out to me in being in this session was that everyone who's producing a podcast, who's hosting a podcast, has passion, and not just passion just for what they love in the industry, but passion for sharing that knowledge with everyone. And I think I really love what Dan shared and even Jonathan shared. In his words, you're giving it away. It's not so much about you as a host that's talking about a particular topic, but really making that guest take center stage. That's really big. I know Pablo from Shared Coordinates said also share that when you're the host, it's your baby. You want to hold on to it, and it's really hard to let go. But when you let go, it's evident that amazing things happen. Again, I'm so excited to see all of your beautiful faces here. It is the highlight of my month. I also feel super honored to moderate this session with a room full of powerful folks who do amazing things to produce content for us industry folks to really geek out, dork out, and really continue to feel our passion of why we're here and why we continue to do what we do. Dan, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and then kick us off on the first kind of talking about your podcast, the Construction Shared Pains, and sort of give us that why it started.
So Dan Swillow, Director of Process and Innovation over at the Walsh Group, a general contractor, construction service provider out of Chicago. Also thought leadership chair with the Construction Progress Coalition, led the Shared Pains podcast, and 2020 was 2020, so we didn't have that many episodes. There were some reasons why. One of the reasons were these successful roundtables, so that was somewhat of a good reason why we didn't have as many episodes in 2020. But we're looking to get back into the swing of things in 2021. The podcast really started out of kind of the needs of the discussions. We were always at conferences talking about things. We're always at the bars and always networking, and it was an avenue to produce a podcast that wasn't sponsored by anyone, so we weren't really necessarily trying to push technology. It was just open, candid conversations on what's shaping the industry from all sorts of different perspectives, from owners, consultants, subcontractors, all the way to the end users. And we really wanted to have all those voices included, and it kind of turned into how we operate CPC as a whole: the decide, debate, deliver. I'm forgetting all four of the D's right now off the top of my head. It's been one of those weeks. And it kind of grew from that. Where we started as a podcast was we did some educational stuff. I'm somewhat of a stickler for audio engineering stuff, and I have a whole setup at home with speakers and a way too expensive computer to just be doing podcasting things. And, I love it and do renderings and all that stuff. But we got into this niche of producing these things, these short snippets and interview style podcasts, and just really enjoyed it. And again, hoping to get back into that and start recording again at conferences and also sharing information from these roundtables.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. A question for you before we move on to Shared Coordinates. What would you say has been your biggest, lesson learned in producing these podcast episodes?
Remote collaboration.
Oh, really?
Get that down packed. I cannot tell you how many times I flipped something to Nathan did something, edited a previous version, sent it back to me. All the levels were off. I was getting down to the granular level of where I was looking at like the wave spectrum, trying to edit out background noise from conference fans and stuff like that. And then I'd get it back and the levels were completely off. So, when you're working collaboratively like that, make sure don't touch this. Just touch this right here, or making sure you have a backup or something like that. We use G Suite, and with Adobe Audition, we can sync seamlessly through that and being able to host those files, as well as just the protocol. How are we sharing those files? How are we storing them? Standard nomenclature and things of that nature. But once we got over those hurdles, it was pretty much smooth sailing. It was just Nathan would do his thing, I would do mine, we'd collaborate, and then off it would go. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So next, let's move on to our friends at Shared Coordinates. But before they talk, I do want to share this like quick story on how I discovered them. I think someone had liked them on LinkedIn, and I was like, Shared Coordinates. It's in Spanish, and I don't know. I was born in Guatemala, Central America. So the reason I started to listen to them was because I was going to make a trip there in a few months, and in my culture, they definitely know if you're not we're not raised in your country because of the way you speak Spanish. So I was like, I need to practice. I need to hear words. And what better way to kind of listen to something that was my favorite topic and was AEC, and it was so great to kind of relearn about BIM and processes and technology in my own language. And I just fell in love. But I'm so happy that Ariel and Pablo are here with us this morning. But I'll go ahead and let them kind of talk a little bit more about the podcast. And if you guys can share like why you did this, you kind of started sharing, you wanted to serve the Latin American community, but we'd love for others to learn more about that. So take it away.
Yeah, my name is Pablo Medina. I am a senior VDC manager for McCarthy. We launched about three and a half years ago, and it's been a wild ride since then, as I'm sure everybody feels the same way. So that's us, Shared Coordinates, catering to the Latin American Spanish-speaking AEC industry. We started in early 2018, and I was driving down the road, coming home late, listening to the Contact Crew, and I said, man, this content is amazing. Like I'd been listening for years, and I had that same realization that there are people in other countries that struggle with trying to understand how this industry is developing AEC all over the world. I had worked in Mexico for a year on a project. BIM had and kind of AEC technology was pretty much unheard of to some degree down there, to a certain degree. I mean, and when we came in talking about we're going to do 3D coordination, we're going to be using Bluebeam, we're going to be using these digital collaboration tools, they just shook their heads and said, this sounds great, but we have no idea where to start from. And that began a journey in my life to make it a goal that if I ever had the chance to be in a position where I could share this knowledge, I would take advantage of it. A few years later, 2018 came around, and I said, much like a few of you realize, I've got the equipment, I've got the knowledge, I've got a computer that's way more fancier than I need. So I can do some of this. And I got together with Luis, who had been building in Mexico for many years, a ton of high-rise projects with a really progressive company down there. And I said, Luis, let's do this. Let's launch a podcast where we can just share. So it's been we're on our fourth season now. We've done nearly 100 episodes. We're about to hit the 100 episode mark, and we're at 98, 99 episodes. And really, it was a chance for us to show the people in Latin America that the technology is not just for those countries that have had 20 years of AEC kind of a groundwork laid for them. And I didn't realize, guys, that there are so many people over the world that listen to these podcasts, and they can leapfrog. They can leapfrog all the challenges that we tripped over and stumbled on as we set up the last 30 years of the infrastructure we have in the US and in other kind of countries that are well developed and seated in technology. And we can give them a great advantage by giving them, and sharing our stories and best practices with them. So these 4 years have been pretty amazing. The amount of growth that we've had in Latin America and just in overseas in Spain. You'll be surprised if you don't already know this, the amount of just desire and hunger that AEC professionals have and love what's happening in other countries. And they're the people to jump on it. They're the people that stay up late researching. And there's so much we can offer those parts of the world, our AEC brothers and sisters out there. And so it's been quite a journey. It's taken us all over the world. It's taken us to several countries in Latin America. We've taught together, we've done episodes together, and then we've hosted podcasts directly in these countries. And along the way, I've learned a ton about different ways of collaboration. You can learn a lot from another country. I don't like saying third world country, but you can learn a lot of countries that are still developing and how they strategize and how they communicate. That's taught me and blown me away on just what they overcome and the strategies that they use. And along the way, about a year into our podcast journey, I met Ariel before it was just Luis and I. And Ariel came along, and I'll let him talk in a moment. But I also want to say is we began to realize that there were so many great professionals out there that wanted to contribute to the podcast. They would send audio to us, amazing questions. They would offer to do segments, and we said, let's open it up. And so now we have probably a team of about 10 people, and they produce different segments of the shows. And myself being a father of 3 and, having quite a busy day myself, we're able to, just like many of you, begin inviting others to collaborate. And I let it go from being my podcast and my baby and Luis, or mine and Luis, and saying, this is the communities now. I mean, we'll still oversee it, but we've got great content that can be, and perspectives offered from Spain and Latin America and South and Central America. And now those contributors give us audio, high quality, high professional. We've kind of worked out all the kinks and really helped our podcast expand and grow in that way. And now it's not just mine, which I'm also proud of, but I'm also, it hurts to see it grow and develop into something else, but that's what's happened. So Ariel, tell the team how you got brought in and how the podcast has been going in kind of Latin America.
Well, you actually, you said a lot there, and that's pretty much our story. So my name is Ariel Castillo. I am from the Dominican Republic, and it's kind of interesting because the way we met, it was through LinkedIn, and we taught a class together, which is the CMBIM course for the AEC. We did it in Panama, and we connected and we stayed in touch, and then we did a class together also in Costa Rica. And when we were there, we basically recorded our session together, and it was pretty nice. And then we started talking about, how we could collaborate. And I was traveling a lot. I went to a lot of countries that year. And the idea behind it is, okay, let's see if we can find professionals that they are implementing this type of technology throughout Latin America. And that's basically how it started. And then we identify somebody else in Spain. His name is David Barco. So we kind of started covering different areas, and that's how the community started growing. And we also started like renovating ourselves. Okay, so we started creating sections, and everybody will have, let's say, one focus. Okay, you'll do interviews for this particular topic, or you'll do something related to news. And that's how basically we went from one episode a month to one episode every week. And that's how we basically growing. So it's been a really collaborative effort.
So great to see that, one podcast had an influence over the sort of the birth of the second podcast. And for me, it's just so wonderful to see that sort of not just stay within the States, but to see that kind of grow internationally. So I want to go ahead and move on over to the Construction DorkCast.
Jeff Sample, I am the head of communications for Join. That's a relatively new deal for me as well, about 3 months in. And I am a co-host of the Contact Crew. I like to call myself the reason they're a crew and not a trio.
Yes.
I was recruited as a guest and turned into a host. And I am a co-host and wrangler of people on the Construction Dorks as well.
Trent, Travis, and Jonathan.
Yeah, Travis Voss. I'm the leader of innovative technologies at Helm Group, Helm Mechanical, and one of the co-hosts of the Construction Dorks podcast. I'm
Jonathan Marsh. I'm one of the co-hosts for Construction Dorks, and I'm the CEO of Steel Toe Consulting. I'm MEP Technologies Consulting. I'm occasionally on the Contact Crew. When they can't find anybody else, they'll call me and I'll co-host with them too.
How did you guys feel about starting a new podcast sort of in this, in this world that we're living today where there's so many other great podcasts? Like, you could kind of dive into that a little bit more.
We were actually listening to a lot of other podcasts, and we noticed there was a gap there. There's two reasons, but this is the first one. There was a gap there between podcasts that sort of covered the general but never got real specific, and podcasts that were sort of based really around a product. And so we said, we really want to have one that allows you to get specific, to get down into the dirt. And we don't want to have to explain all our acronyms. And we realized that what we were actually missing wasn't really podcast, but it was the meetings that happened after these different events. So you'd go to a convention, you get together, you'd have this meeting, and you have this great discussion in which you're talking to other people that are really passionate about construction, and you're arguing about technology and everything else. Me and Jeff argue all the damn time, and we were like,
I think that could be a podcast episode. Can that be?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we thought, can we capture that and sort of bring it out to everyone else? Because I know, I went to a lot of conferences, and you go and you sit in the class, and that's great. But most of what I learned was when you're sitting at the bar with everybody else, or sitting at the restaurant with everybody else, you're asking questions, you're getting a little bit deeper. And we figured no one is going to we kind of decided to break all the rules. We have 4 hosts regularly, which is too many hosts, right? You're not allowed to have 4 hosts. We use acronyms, and we do not explain ourselves all the time. Our audio could use significant help. So like we could use your help, guys. And I think I said before we started, our video editing is either done by Travis or we may promote my daughter to do video editing. So again, the idea was to be laid back, though. When you're done with the convention, when you're there, you're laying back with your friends, and you're talking about construction. And what's been really cool is we've been able to get people from GC side and from these other areas to have those conversations. And we really do share pains. And so I mean, Travis, do you want to add something? I know you want to add something.
Well, I was just going to say that part of the reason that it's the Construction DorkCast is exactly what you're talking about, Jonathan. Is there is this movement that kind of started. DJ Phipps is the one that kind of coined the term of us construction nerds sitting around and talking at these conferences, and it kind of came together by Jeff, Jonathan, and Trent pinging me individually, saying, "Hey, we should do a podcast that's trying to make up for missing this stuff at the event." So that's kind of what it evolved into, and that's what we've been trying to focus on, is keeping it. We don't care if you represent a particular product or company. You can talk about it, but let's talk about the problem you're trying to solve, not the specific solutions. That's what we're really after, is kind of having those real conversations about, whatever, XYZ software does this, but let's talk about the underlying problem that it's trying to solve, and have those real discussions where we can actually nerd out. And we try to do, we obviously, the Construction Dorks name shows that we try to have a little fun. We usually have some sort of adult beverage while we're doing it. So we try to have usually alternate between, a somewhat serious tech topic or industry topic and something that's just a little fun and nerdy.
And I think Pablo said something really important that we agree with, is we don't so much own the show. In fact, we constantly give away the show. We've even had shows where we were on for we were on for Dorkettes for 5 minutes, and then we all left and let them do the show. It was the most popular show, which made us all cry a little bit. But that idea that the industry kind of has a lot of things that it needs to talk about, and we need to get good stories of technology out there, because there's tons of bad stories on a job site about how technology goes wrong, but there's not good stories and good narratives, and we're trying to bring that to the industry too.
That's awesome. I can tell you, as an audience member on the Dork-Cast episode, I really definitely respected that you guys took a step back, because that's hard to do. Like Pablo said, when it's your baby, you want to be with that, all the time, but it's definitely admirable that all of you guys step back and let the Dork-Cast shine. So
shameless
Travis,
plug,
I cut you off.
Will be on Thursday.
Tomorrow. It's your shameful plug-in. Tune in.
I can share you the link so you can register.
All right, let's move on to Marcus.
My name is Marcus Turner. I am the other half of what is known as Constructor. Brittany Campbell Turner is the host, and my wife. So I do all the behind the scenes work.
So Marcus, let's focus on you and your podcast.
I just had to look back, and people were talking about 3-4 years ago. I realized Constructor started about 7 years ago. So When we started doing it, it was like basically no construction podcast. I think there was Contract Trio and the Construction Industry Podcast. So thank you for joining the podcasting community, and thank you for having some more content about construction. Thank you very much, everybody who's on the call. So when we went into it, it was basically just off of the frustrations of my wife's and my current position in construction. We were just worried about like organizational change, habits, processes, things like that. And like we were trying to show people that there were other ways to do things. But we really couldn't do it because they were like, well, I don't know anybody that's even doing these things in this way. So I was like, okay, fine. We'll just start a podcast and we'll start talking about it and say, hey, here's somebody else doing this. Here's someone doing this. Like, we can implement these tools in. Here's step by step of how the process was. So that was kind of like their journey, and just kind of transition from just talking to general contractors to talking to more owners, and trying to understand what were some of the challenges, and even challenging the operational models. But that's kind of like where we are today. And now we're kind of transitioning into another phase, I would say. It's just more about like creating actual projects and storytelling those projects through Constructor.
That's awesome. Storytelling. That's something that do you find that challenging, with storytelling? Because, storytelling, like what happens in construction, is that easy to do or is that challenging?
Right now it's challenging, but like right now it's also good because through the process right now, it's more like, it's more about trying to we're going through the ideation process right now, as far as like talking to people and coming up with the pre-planning process. But I'm pretty sure once we start getting into development and implementation stage of actually like as what projects we're working on as we're going through it. I mean, I'm sure, as everybody knows, if you work a full-time job, trying to balance this in a podcast is pretty tough.
Yeah, a lot of you guys have mentioned working full-time and having, a family. This is just a general question for all of you here. How do you manage, or balance that sort of responsibility of your day job and family, but also how do you also manage your passion? Because all of you guys here are, creating amazing podcast episode, really, founded on passion. How do you guys do it? I'm curious. Okay, I want to go ahead and move on to Ralph.
Hi everyone, Ralph Montague. I'm from Dublin in Ireland. I'm an architect. For the past 12 years, I've been a BIM consultant. I'm a director at ArcDocs, which is a consultancy based in Dublin. AEC Hive is a new venture for us. We set up a sort of community of innovators, and I suppose it came from a general frustration. I've been in the business for 30 years, hence all the gray hairs, and that innovation just seemed to move very slowly. And while the industry is a very innovative industry when it comes to projects, we just found that the learnings weren't being shared in a more general way. So we didn't actually start to start a podcast. We actually started to set up a community and connect all the great work that's happening around the world, and trying to bring it sort of to one place where people could to get into the discussion about innovation. And we ran a hackathon in 2019, and we thought we might do more hackathons, but of course 2020 put a spanner in that works. But we obviously, through many years of participating in this sector, have met really interesting people. So we decided we'd start the podcast as a way to give those people that we knew who were doing great things a platform, maybe a broader platform than what they were doing elsewhere, to share what they were doing around innovation. And so that's the kind of general topic. It's about innovation. And so we as in terms of the podcast, we only started in 2020, but I suppose we've done about 24 episodes now, and it's been quite broad, so we're not too focused on any particular topic, and it's really to give a platform for people doing various things. So it's been very interesting. It's fascinating to talk to these people. The conversations, we try and keep it to an hour, but the conversation always, the hour goes so quickly. You always think, well, what happened? Because they're just fascinating conversations. What we've also tried to do is aggregate all the podcasts that are happening. So we've created on the community platform, we've set up a podcast section, and we've all your podcasts. Hopefully everybody's listed there, but if you're not, you can just add your podcast. So the idea was that if people connected their podcasts, then other people could search across all the podcasts. So far we have about 50 different podcasts in the AEC sector on the platform, and that's about 3,800 episodes, I think, the last time I looked. And so people can search by topic, by name, by whatever. And so that's quite useful, I suppose, if people are looking to find a topic and different people and different podcasts from around the world. I suppose we haven't taken it too seriously yet in terms of setting it up. And, so we typically just arrange a 1 hour call with people and as a Zoom or Teams meeting, and we record it. And fortunately, in my other business, we have someone who can do media editing, so he edits the audios. And but yeah, we're looking forward to learning from all you experts, of course, and getting a little bit more serious about it. But the main idea was to create a community of communities. It's almost, that's the way we see it, like to work with the likes of AEC Hackathon and other groups around the world that are just doing incredible things, and just bring that to a wider audience around the world. So
that's exciting, Ralph. Thank you so much. And speaking of it, you mentioned an hour goes by really fast. I would look at the time, and I definitely want to give some time to Eric, Tahira, and Todd.
Hey everybody, I'm Todd Wyatt. I'm Director of Creative Marketing at Applied Software, and I host the Bridging the Gap podcast. Bridging the Gap started really as a video series about 3 or 4 years ago, where I was talking with our internal consultants at Applied, and we realized about a year and a half ago that we should expand these conversations and tackle the broader concepts going out in the industry. And so we launched the podcast in about a year and a half ago to focus and highlight the innovations happening around specifically construction and MEP. And what we found is that you really have to kind of take a step back, and we focused a lot in recent episodes, and we will this year, on what are the building blocks to successfully adopt and implement technology. And that's not necessarily having the right technology in place. That's having the right corporate culture in place. That's having the right leadership skills in place. That's having the right growth mindset. And what does that really mean? And our tagline is keep innovating. And my favorite question I ask at the end of all the podcasts now is, what does innovation mean to you? And I get an entirely different answer with every single episode, which is super fascinating. On a simple word like innovation, it means something totally different. So that's where we spend a lot of time kind of unpacking what is the growth mindset. How do we as an industry set ourselves up for success in the next 10 years, as construction is going to look radically different over the next 10 years as it did the last 50. And so what are those kind of building blocks that we need to put in place in order to be successful and have a good launching pad, and then to encourage other people that the innovation water is not scary. It is definitely doable, and more people in the industry can adapt than what they think. I think 2020 really proved that case. Yeah. You can adapt pretty quickly to tech when you need to.
Yep, this is a very resilient industry, that's for sure. Correct me if I mispronounce her name. Tahira? Tahira, thank you.
Yes, it's like Shakira, but completely different.
Oh, I love Shakira. I love Shakira. She's like my first star.
I mean, I'm not Shakira.
I know, but cool. But I will remember. That's the thing. I will remember. So.
Oh, wonderful! It's very nice to meet you, Lilian. So I'm Tahira Ali. I am the Executive Director of Industry Innovation for NECA. That title is pretty fresh. This is my third day of this new job.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And prior to that, I came from Milwaukee Tool, where I spent about 8 years doing everything from tool design to innovation and strategy, construction technology, and kind of industry stewardship. I am a frequent guest on most of your podcasts. And then I also am a pretty regular co-host, guest host for James Benham's JB Knowledge Contact Crew podcast. And I recently helped to launch the Innovation Overload podcast for Nika. So they kind of tricked me, and that was something I was a co-host for while I worked for Milwaukee Tool. And then I think I tricked them into turning that into a full-time job. I remember, I want to say it was 5 or 6 years ago when I switched roles from being in the background designing, motors and Bluetooth chips and drills and heated gear and things like that to actually coming in front of, new technology and where things were going. And I remember one of the first things I told my new bosses was, I will do whatever you want. I will not do podcasts. So joke's on me, I think. And I would say that a cohort of very enthusiastic colleagues and friends, such as Mr. Sample, were very strong in encouraging me and kind of tricked me, I think, a little bit into my first JB Knowledge podcast, which is where so many of us start. And as I mentioned, I'm pretty new to Nika, but the Innovation Overload podcast, what we're actually launching, our 3rd episode just went live, and or might be going live today. So basically the goal here is there's so much out there with innovation, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek title for us because we've all been privy to the overload of webinars, the overload of tech, the overload of that McKinsey chart. So everybody knows how much there is out there, and so how do you sift through it? And I'm really big on the idea of what's that first step. What's the first thing that you can do? What's the next thing that you can do? What's the takeaway that you can go home with? Because so many people listen to a podcast or they go to a webinar, they go to a conference, and they're just like, hey, that was cool. And then they go back to their lives exactly as it was. And so, what's that next tangible thing you can do is very important to me. And so that's something that we've kind of tried to focus on. A lot of the things that have been talked about today, the idea of like, what does innovation mean to you? I think I was hired both at Milwaukee and at Nika to focus on things like drones and robots. And I think I've spent much more time wasting those two degrees and really focusing on change management and people and diversity and resilience and things like how you can prepare for the future today with what you have versus, how do I hire a technologist? How do I throw machine learning at a problem? So that's been really important for me professionally and personally. And then I think also there's the added layer of, I'm a big believer in giving back to the community that helped you up. And for me, just the fact that there are so few women in the industry, there are so few people of color, there are so, even from an age perspective, there, predominantly the average age in construction is pretty high. And so having the ability and almost the responsibility to represent just a different perspective, a different view, I think is really important. And so it's kind of a whether or not I wanted to come professionally or morally, or again, just from, emotionally, how much I enjoy connecting with people. All 3 of these things kind of have pushed me to these great opportunities to be involved with podcasts.
Don't manage it. You just let it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Don't manage it.
You find 20 minutes and it's like, okay, let's go right now. Let's take care of it.
Yeah, as long as you don't care that you don't get 6-8 hours of sleep, you could fit it in. Been running on 4 or 5 for like the last 4 years. So
I think Lilian, you hit the nail on the head there, right? Like it's our passion. And so, everyone here is values people, values connection, values getting information out, values being a lifelong learner. So when you're driven by these things, when you're driven by that growth mindset, it becomes so powerful and rewarding to, try to move mountains and play Tetris with your life and your schedule a little bit to be able to continue to connect in these deep and meaningful ways.
Connection, human connection, that's so important, especially during this, weird time we're all living at the moment, and we're all missing those bar conversations. I hope that anyone listening to this in the future, we're not alcoholics. We enjoy a good beverage. But yeah, you guys are right. There's so many good conversations, that happen at the bar or conferences that, I love hearing them later on in an episode, or it really just kind of promotes new ideas that we're talking about today. And then Eric, I know you're last, but you're definitely not least. So
thanks, Lilian. So yeah, I'm Eric Thomas and the host of Autodesk's Digital Builder podcast. So we're a relatively new show, started at the beginning of November, and the intention really was to find an opportunity to engage with Autodesk customers, Autodesk partners, and everybody else out in the industry who had a really compelling story to tell. So we're not a product-focused show. You won't hear me saying, oh, Autodesk Construction Cloud is XYZ, or speaking about feature sets or anything along those lines. Like, the intent is really to give other people who have a compelling story to share a very interesting platform to bring out those tidbits that they have to share with everybody else. So I consider my role as host mostly just the shepherd through the conversation. So you won't hear me, opining at length about any particular topic unless I do have a particular amount of knowledge or interest about that particular thing. But really my function is just to make sure that I'm giving all of these diverse guests from all walks of life across the AEC industry an opportunity to share some of their stories and how they've kind of engaged with the industry. I really like focusing on kind of the future of the industry and technology. And of course, in our first handful of episodes, COVID has come up a decent amount simply because we're just, awash in that state within AEC. So it ends up being very topical. But at the end of the day, I'm just excited to have an opportunity to, speak with so many intelligent and compelling people across the industry who just really have some neat stuff to talk about. I worked for a couple different general contractors before I jumped to the software side of things. And for me, it's just a real privilege to have the chance to continue having those conversations that I used to have back when I was still more boots on the ground. And also, just on a personal note, I used to be a radio host when I was in college, and it's just been a lot of fun to get back behind the microphone and to be able to have it wrap up into my job has just been an absolute pleasure and privilege. I'd have to say it's probably the most fun thing that I get to do, even if it can be a little bit stressful trying to schedule guests and make sure we're hitting release dates and everything else. But we've kind of hit the ground running and have had a lot of very positive engagement and an overwhelming amount of listeners so far. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity to be here and thankful for the opportunity to continue to give really interesting and intelligent people who have way cooler stuff than I have to say a platform to do it.
That's awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a question for all of you guys, and I'm kind of asking this question through the lens of someone who wants to start a podcast or, really, wants to know, like, what does this entail? Like, what would you tell someone, or maybe yourself, if you can go back to the future, what would you tell someone who wants to start a podcast? What are what are those top things they should keep in mind? And anyone, feel free to jump in.
My number one thing is at least have 5 episodes recorded.
Oh, that's a really great tip. Have 5 episodes recorded.
I wish I'd known that when we started. I'm in a bit of a scramble mode right now as I try to lock in all the details with consent forms and a bunch of other fun stuff that I've got to do for every episode. And I wish I had had 5 or 10 or 15 in the can before we push the go button.
Yes.
Do you feel, Eric, that because you represent, you have the backing of a bigger company such as Autodesk, do you feel that there's a little bit more red tape involved in producing podcasts? And I don't know if anyone else here who, I know we have, a couple podcasts here that are backed by a company and some of them are sort of, based out of passion. Is there a big difference between those red tapes?
I haven't had a lot of red tape so far. There was definitely some legwork in just getting people on board and excited about the initiative. I think I started talking about it a little bit more than a year before we actually pushed the go button and did a couple pilot episodes. So I think just as long as you're able to really show the value of this kind of platform to everybody at the organization, once you do that and you kind of prove the merit, it kind of goes from there. I mean, you are absolutely correct. Like, I've got some brand equity that I get to ride on as far as getting engagement, and we have a lot of followers with Autodesk. So getting a decent amount of listeners out the gate was, I think, a little bit easier than if I had decided I wanted to start the podcast from my bedroom without that support. So I'm very thankful for it, but I guess it might change the conversation a little bit too, just because, I mean, I do represent Autodesk every day when I turn this microphone on. So
I think that our podcast is probably a little bit different because we are the other side where we're just a bunch of nerds. You know, it's our passion. And I think that we sometimes get caught up on views and listens and stuff like that. But then every time we turn on the camera, we're just hanging out and having fun. And I think that's what hopefully shows up a little bit in what we do, is it's not as serious.
Yeah, Jeff
Very
told me that
grassroots.
when I was first starting our podcast, of don't try to script everything and don't take yourself too seriously. And I really took that to heart, Jeff. And that really helped kind of just let the conversation flow where you want. I think it's so tempting as the host to try to force particular talking points in an episode and want to have it perfectly scripted, and letting go of some of that control is, you get so much better conversations when you let go of the control and just see where the guest takes it.
I think really quick, following up on that, what we've learned is you can't spend too much time with the guest beforehand, either in like a prep room or a pre-interview, because then they tend to tell you all their best nuggets off camera, and then they refer to it a lot and they say, oh, you know what I told you yesterday. So we learned that one a couple times.
I started recording those automatically now.
Oh, that's a great idea.
You get some good nuggets in that.
So if you're interested in starting a podcast, hopefully those are great tips for you to take away today. And I also want to thank everyone, who attended this session. Thank you so much for, having such a great, disposition and just sharing your passion with everyone. So thank you.